Welcome, welcome, all, one and all. Thank you for joining us in this fine daytime on this beautiful Friday, Freya day of the great June. We have a beautiful show for you this evening. It's not the evening, it's the daytime. I just got done telling you that. The idea is, where do the maps truly draw their time frequencies as we move along in this ocean of chaos? And as the sun moves across the horizon above us, we can find ourselves and pinpoint ourselves directly on this map, as we realize the map is truly not the territory, and reality is a little more negotiable than any of us truly want to ever admit. So today, we're going to talk about something that is not just near and dear to my heart, as well as this fine gentleman next to me. It's something that I believe is needed to be continued, to be understood, and progressed through this beautiful cosmic dance of meaning and madness. Phillip K. Dick, the visionary Gnostic prophet himself, Robert Anton Wilson, old Uncle Bob, the one who brings us great works such as the Cosmic Trigger, the Illuminatus trilogies, the Illuminatus paper, and so much more. And this thing that I think is continuing to progress through this craze of chaos, and it's Operation Mindfuck, or OM. And for this fine day, I get to have my beautiful co-host be the great R. Marx. How you doing today, Robbie?
Yeah, doing great. Thanks for having me on, Brandon. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time, and our schedules, finally the gears lined up and we were able to, get some time to come on together.
Yeah, damn right. It's beautiful when finally the stars align and we get to do the great dance. I do know that these two characters, the great prophets and visionaries, are near and dear to your heart as well. Can you give me a little, we're just going to kind of go back and forth and kind of lead us into this great cosmic dance. What brought you into Phillip K. Dick, Robert Anton Wilson world?
Oh, just being so submersed in literature and ancient texts and kind of the psychedelic culture. I basically just kind of cross paths with these different characters, and at the time that I encountered them, they affected the way I thought about the world. So I began to seek out more and more of their works and just try to have a better understanding of who they were in their own time and how that philosophy kind of affects ancient history as well as modernity.
Oh, that's a great answer. I think that's beautiful. And as well as how it stems into both of them, interesting enough, with Phillip K. Dick, not just on the outskirts of the more Gnostic philosophies or comparative religions, but actually deeply ingrained into them, as he's one of my favorite texts of his being Valis, and his that trilogy. But the same thing is that with Robert Anton Wilson, they dive deep into, both of them, I would state in their own way, techniques of consciousness change.
Yes. Which
then, as how I met you and how we come together, the great Nick Cardinal Head himself, the shout out to the great occult rejects. Yeah, and it's such a beautiful thing that we are then able to find ourselves here, because the occult is wrapped in and out. I saw John Michael Greer actually post on X about this whole thing about how he didn't feel that that Phillip K. Dick was actually an occultist. And so I think that's an interesting way, now that I think about it, to kind of start off with this conversation. What do you think about that kind of statement?
If you read a lot of occultism and then you read a lot of Phillip K. Dick, you consistently see these ideas of occultism within Dick's work, from charms, amulets, prophets, people that participate, seeing through the veil in, what was it? I just read it, Dr. Blood Money. Mm-hmm. There's a character in there, and they basically, this is post-apocalyptic, and you have mutants that are basically sprouting up, and they call them funny people. So he creates this whole class of people that he kind of uses as a mechanism to show how prejudices work through all time. And within these funny people, he represents this character that's a little girl, and within her she has a twin that was absorbed within her, and she's and he even references the term several times as a homunculus within, growing within her and talking to her, and wanting to get out and get into the real world, and and you just see also within the aspects of psychology, the way that the outward world affects the inward world. And he has a real problem with commercialism. He has a real problem with, the governments. And he's able to take through these fictional works and convey to you these ideas without directly bringing the hammer down. It's a softer kind of representation of understanding of the whole, while avidly criticizing the quote unquote black iron prison that kind of holds us and affects us, and seeks to use our psyche as a juggernaut for the many forces that are around us.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a great way of stating that. And to wrap it into also how, right, this cosmic dance of meaning and madness, interesting enough, just as what you're talking about, is he kind of slow rolls you into trying to understand what is this reality that you're in when you're in his books. And it is kind of a slow roll. It's like, it's almost dry, the writing, as you're getting into it. And then there's little things that are playing on the subconscious in your conscious mind until you realize, like, the main character and you don't know what is going on.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important, because that's exactly how we feel in our lives right now.
Yes. And what's also interesting is when you look at the interviews with Philip K. Dick, he said a couple times that all of his books are the same story. So, currently I'm going through, and it's just funny when you were like, let's do it on Philip K. Dick and Robert Anton Wilson, because I was already in the process of going through every single Philip K. Dick book in the order that he wrote them, which is different than the order that he released them. Because, like, if you go back to, there's one where it's this traveling salesman, and he basically, there's an encounter with a guy that's selling these dirty records. So he calls him up to try to blackmail him. And instead, this guy sucks him in and ends up giving him like this super nice job. It's almost like he just made some kind of deal with the devil, and he just gets everything. He's got a baby on the way, so it's all stability, but he has to travel around and record the different American folk music that pops up, because there's like a revisionism of music, because everybody's kind of tired with the progressive music that had come through, mass media, basically. And so they're wanting to go back to the jug bands, the banjos, which we're really seeing now as well, when you got so many people going back, and the old honky tonk country, and the old bluegrass kind of coming into the modern jam grass. So it's but nonetheless, that same character, like 8 or 9 books later, he pops up in this small little town, and these children are singing. He's like, oh, we got to get them on tape. And the girl's like, no, you have to wait until late at night, like 2 or 3 in the morning, when the adults are congregating and singing. And she's like, and you don't even know what they are, And so you see these characters reoccurring through the various books that open up and give you different understandings of kind of modernity.
No, I do know. That's beautiful. And I think for our audience, it's good to give them a brief introduction into the man, the myth, the visionary Gnostic saint himself, Philip K. Dick, who was an American science fiction writer whose work consistently probed questions about the nature of reality, identity, and what it means to be human. He wrote prolifically, even though he didn't make much of any money from his writing, through the 60s and 70s, producing novels like Ubix, which I highly recommend everyone to read.
That's one of his great ones.
One of his great ones. The idea is that time is slowly deteriorating, and that you need a spray can to spray time back into its current space, thus so it doesn't completely deteriorate and go away. And then it asks the question, who is truly alive and who is truly dead?
Right. Well, and that's kind of a theme of Philip K. Dick, really, is this idea of what is true. We have the history, which was written by the winners, but we have these artifacts from history.
Yeah.
These various, pistols or lighters or different books, that he has banned in different places. There's a book in Man in the High Castle called The
Oh.
Grasshopper Lies Deep, where it like H.P. Lovecraft's Necronomicon
Right.
is the device that drives kind of parts of the story. And so, but these artifacts and their true aspect of them, and us being able to hold a piece of, because you figure as humanity expands and as we're starting to stretch into the stars and colonize different planets, and the Earth's overpopulated, post-apocalyptic nuclear war, that basically these are like sacred, profound objects from the time, the good old days.
Yeah.
And essentially what ends up happening, and you see it in several of the books, is there's shops that set up to fabricate these artifacts, and and he talks about all the different oils and the different chemical processes that they're using in order to be able to simulate the aspect of the artifact itself, and then they're selling these on the black market. And some people can tell and some people can't, and it gets into this idea really of what is a real thing. What is a real thing versus what is a simulation or a simulacra. And it even comes to the point where some of the characters early on, this is very early on in the stuff, back in the late 50s, where they begin to create simulacra humans that are like machines that outwardly appear real. And they create this Abraham Lincoln character. They create, Goebbels from the Nazi Party. They create Nero. They create all these different, and they become the synthetic teachers for the various children. And the children and they even have the sinister characters like Blackbeard and, some of the other kind of nefarious characters through history, so that these kids can go question them all and get their worldviews. And that progresses, afterwards into simulacra politicians, simulacra newscasters, where they will get people that look like someone to play the part of them, even though they've been dead for 20 years. So it becomes, and kind of like we see with like Paul McCartney or some of these other various conspiracies that surround us,
Right. And you're talking about Paul McCartney's actually dead, and then they replaced him. Is that that's the conspiracy they were talking about? He died a long time ago, then they replaced him with a clone.
Right.
So then they can move forward. And we're not saying that's true or not. We're just saying this is an interesting reality.
Echo.
It's an echo of the things that we're just talking about.
Right.
And fascinating enough, that leads me into then about Blade Runner, or do androids dream of electric sheep? To kind of move into that is to ask the question of like what it means to be human. And can we tell the difference between a human and a cyborg? Which then, and then which leads into the allegory, which is I think a real allegory of what we experience on a day-to-day basis. And people are like, what's a real allegory? It's like, well, we all know Plato's cave is an allegory of the understanding that most of the narrations and things that we see are but shadows on a wall, and you take your perceptions for the thing themselves, and it's time to walk out of the cave into the light so you can see things as they actually are. Reflections, a mimesis, a representation of the true light, the good, justice, and the forms itself, which are actually but and another reflection of the celestial splendor as we move through our own occult history. Fascinating enough that I don't know, in our day and age, as we walk in the world, it's almost hard enough to understand what a real person is. I feel like we're continually walking amongst animals.
MPG, the whole phenomenon,
the NPCs.
NPCs, there you go. Yeah. And it becomes interesting because even with the realities that we live with, the mass industrialized society that we subside within, when you're buying vinyl, that's a simulacra of the recording. When you're watching television, that is a simulacra that's beamed through the air, through the, whatever, to get to where you are, for you to be able to view it on your screen, screen. And then you get into You were speaking of Plato, right?
Yep.
And within Plato, there's this inherent idea that within a certain time period, things will culminate to create certain things that only are allowed in that time period. And we see that as the time slips away and we seek to hold on to the past, as you can see in the books, and I have records, and this is all echoes from a previous, in some case hundreds of years, some case thousands of years ago, with the sacred text,
Yeah.
So but Plato talks about the idea that it takes the culmination of this society to have the skill and the expertise and the means and the tools to be able to fabricate and create something as simple as a stringed instrument. And through the course of creating that stringed instrument, when you pluck the strings, you can create harmonies and you can create these melodies. And these are things that are inherent, and music itself is an anomalous thing in the fact that it's in the air. It's something that we can't touch. It's something we perceive through our feeling, as far as the vibrational, especially if you go to like a big EDM show or something,
Right.
The bass is jumping up and down through you, to your ears, and the little hairs that rattle, the little shells in your ears that transmit to your brain, as far as that's just your input devices, and we all could, depending on our physiognomy, have different input device. There are a couple women they found that have double the number of cones and rods in their eyes, and they're able to see a multitude of colors that normal people can't see. So depending upon the way that our body is created within reality depends upon how we take in the world, right? But when you can have all these things culminate and develop and create this instrument that has melody, right? But now you're going to take that instrument and you're going to destroy it, right? But those harmonies and those melodies, they still exist. It's just a matter of having another time period where all those specific things can come together to remanufacture this instrument to be able to draw forth those harmonies and those melodies, right? So Philip K. Dick, he has the idea that when they're making these simulacras, like this Abraham Lincoln character, that are they actually creating the resonant factor of what Abraham Lincoln is to such an extent that they're actually drawing the soul of Abraham Lincoln out of the cosmos, out of the void, and bringing it into that simulacra, because it becomes all the documented things he is. And when we get into sympathetic magic, the more you have the right crystals, you have the right herbs, you have the right incenses, you chant the right resonant tones that all bring these things into the so if you're able to take and create this entity to such an extent, are you actually bringing that entity, that soul of that entity back into the simulacra that you've created? And so, again, back to what is reality and what is this, holographic, experience, this fractal that we're existing within.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's beautiful, Robbie. Everybody, Robbie's laying down knowledge right now. You're getting the secrets of the Illuminati, as we realized from the Robert Anton Wilson and Philip K. Dick. If you have the ears to hear and the eyes to see, you can garner some really interesting information. And so one of the things I want to talk about here is how there's multiple things as you're going on about that, is that, well, first off, for me, as I'm reading all these people, somebody that was huge for Robert Anton Wilson was Alfred Korzynski and his general semantics, which is so important for this understanding of what to not mistake the map for the territory. And that's what we're continually doing at all times, is we're mistaking the map for the territory. We're mistaking the menu for the meal. And that goes back to what you're talking about with the simulacra or the simulation. And that's how then you get the great myths of the Matrix, all stemming back from the great Gnostic understanding of that we are but light trapped within this black iron prison, light trapped within the material realm. That is one way to view these things. that is a really important way to view them, because you can get to then, as you move back to the Platonic understanding of us trying to discover or remember, and that's his epistemic understanding of knowledge, is that everything is a remembering. And so it kind of leads to, like, can you tap into the resonant frequency of that Abraham Lincoln character and do the right sympathetic magic, or the right kind of technology, which is magic is just the technology that we don't understand.
H.G. Wells.
H.G. Wells right there. And what we can do is can we truly bring a soul back to life into a physical form? And these are questions we don't really know. As Aleister Crowley states, there's always more hunchbacks than soldiers. There's always more questions than answers. And this is what both of these characters are continually leading us down the rabbit hole, to continually help us understand that we must question our very perception. Back to Korzybinski. Korzybinski states how there is the concrete event, right? Like you were stating, there's the event of the music being produced, right? In the Plato's ways, maybe that music itself is but a representation of the beautiful with the harmonies of the spheres, but we can lead to the actual event being the concrete thing. And then you get your recording of that, and you go home and you listen to it on vinyl, and all of a sudden you're understanding that that is a report from the actual event. And then now let's say that you are going to now tell your friend about that event that happened, but also your experience of listening to it. So that's a report of a report. And we're so far getting away from the actual event that we understand that our nervous system collects data and then leads it into abstractions, until you get this highest order abstraction with these words like justice, war, peace, terrorism, humanity, existence, and the like. And that's where then the fuckery comes about, because that is where you get these high order dark sorcerers, the parasitic oligarch class, being able to use the propaganda and the manipulation techniques, very similar ones that we use to do to ourselves, the hermetic understanding. If we can tap into our own nervous system and start to truly understand what it means to know thyself, as Plato states, we can then understand that if people are putting this imprints against us, then we have to actually ask ourselves, what is the world that we're living in? Am I actually experiencing the world itself, or am I just truly experiencing a simulation or the simulacra of the actual world?
The echoes. Well, and it's interesting because now I spoke about the guy selling the dirty records and how he gives him the job, and then he goes and records the folk music. And later on, when you get into Valis, my favorite, it becomes more modern, more futuristic. You kind of go. I mean, you got to figure Philip K. Dick. He was hard into ROTC. He went and actually worked in the rocket research program in his college days, and kind of didn't like it and dropped out. So he has all this technical understanding. There is some talk that he was possibly in some sort of a MK Ultra program, but nobody can actually. Yeah,
that can't be verified.
Yeah, exactly.
But he was deeply integrated into Silicon Valley of that time.
Oh yeah,
which is why he was able to also see the future, so to speak, because he was seeing the upcoming,
the extreme movement in regard to branching out of the sciences, and so he kind of took that and extrapolated, the endless possibilities there within. And now with the recording industry. Within Valis, it gets into the idea that I don't know if you remember the character Linda Fox.
Oh yeah, I try to tell everybody about this character, and that's in Divine Invasion. That's in Divine Invasion. So that's the second book of the trilogy: Valis, Divine Invasion, and Timothy Archer.
Timothy Archer, yeah. Which is very dry. It's very dry. The driest novels.
Yeah,
it's very profound at the same time, But this Linda Fox character, she was a pop star at one point. And then, through the course of Valis, she had passed away, and they had somehow been able to create simulacra music. It's almost like the modern AI music we have now.
Yeah. So, or even I would say that it's almost like the modern Lady Gaga or any of these kind of characters who aren't writing their own music.
Nope.
Right. And producing their own music.
20 or 30 producers.
Ariana Grande, any of these characters, and don't get caught on any of the names.
They're like the Monkees.
Yeah, exactly.
Or some say the Beatles coming out of Tavistock.
Yep.
You know, I mean, and then you can get into the whole rock and roll war and the British invasion and the,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, but nonetheless, Philip K. Dick then takes that to the next extreme, and it's in outer space, in the colonizers of space, and they're like getting the newest, you know, Linda Fox that's been recently found and remastered, and like how
Yeah.
great, you know, and they'll just lay in their space tubes and kind of, you know, listen to Linda Fox. And so it's this, but he also talks about the idea that as time has progressed, that within the recording signal itself, that there has been laid in, like
Yes.
superseded, a signal that's meant to affect the psyche on some level when you listen to these things.
Yeah. Meant to
So
keep you asleep.
right, right.
But
So,
yeah.
you know, he very much plays into a lot of what modern media does. I mean, when he gets into commercialism, the commercials, you know, like it's to the point where you have to put a coin in your Con app door to go outside, you know, and your door will talk to you and tell you how cheap you are because you don't have
Right.
enough money to go outside. You know, and then you get in your car, and your car, it bitches at you, and there's a kill switch on the cars, which we recently have seen come into being, you know,
Yeah.
and like, and he argues with, and so the car is just like, get in the back seat and I'll drive you home, you know. And so you start to see these things, the possibility. But back to the commercials,
Yeah.
you know, even they have little flies that are machines that look like insects, and they'll come flying in, and the way they vibrate their wings, they'll broadcast a commercial into your ears, and you have to kill it if you don't want to listen to the commercial, you know. And there's
Yeah.
one guy that he has a copy of a commercial in his pocket, and every time he watches it or listens to it, it talks about his inadequacy, you know, because when you get into what is it, propaganda, the book about
Edward Bernays.
Edward Bernays
Yeah.
and all the advertising, and
Yeah.
you basically, through the course of the advertising message, you make the person feel insufficient in some means, so that they feel like, you know, either through sex or through luxury or through some sort of tactile, you know, thing that they feel like they need to make them, you know, lesser than they are, so they feel like they have to buy it. The psychological aspect of commercialism itself, you know. And that's why on my podcast I'll never have any commercials. I'm not into commercials myself.
Nice.
So, but nonetheless, this commercial that he has in his pocket, whenever he sees it, it makes him feel like he has a body smell. So he develops this psychological problem that causes his body to actually smell.
That's
So
hilarious.
yeah, but as far as just the aspects of how commercials act and react on the psyche, and when we watch modern television now, all we see is pharmaceutical commercials,
Oh
you
yeah.
know. And what is that doing to the? I remember some of the first pharmaceutical commercials. You know, it was like a bubble, and it jumped out. It's like, are you sad? Do you feel bad? Maybe you need this, you know. And it's
Yeah.
like, you know, same thing with Philip K. Dick.
Yeah.
He's like, you know, using these aspects of commercials and showing the forces behind them and how they're using it to manipulate society. And it's just, so when we look at modernity and the way that everything you see in front of your eyes now is paid for to be there by somebody
Oh yeah.
within MSM, you know, versus people that are actually looking at, you know, the documents of the past, having them physically in hand, and bringing these stories to you, so that, you know, we have a deeper understanding of what our history is as a humanity itself.
Beautiful, Robbie. Beautiful. And
Mm.
it is really important. I think it's really important to everything what we're talking about with Philip K. Dick as we round, you know, we're gonna, as you all are listening, thank you everybody for listening.
Yeah.
We're going to move in and out of the Philip K. Dick and Robert Anton Wilson as these Gnostic visionary high level Illuminati characters. And Illuminati, I don't mean Adam Weishaupt and his scientific materialist fucking gay shit that he was doing within, like, interacting with all the different Masonic / secret societies as he was trying to bring on a new kind of revolution.
All the Roman hidden names.
All the Roman and hidden names and all these
Yeah.
things. And it's not like that. But what it truly is it's basically like the same thing that MagusintheMedia is doing, is trying to show you that there's myth, magic, and meaning in everything that you do.
Yeah.
And that we're trying to lay the breadcrumbs. And that's exactly like in Ubix. They were laying the breadcrumbs so these people started to truly question their reality, and not a way where I ever want anybody to feel despair. Now, I want to remember that I want us all to know the Kierkegaardian despair is a lot different than the kind of despair your psychotherapist is trying to do and tried to help you understand, or, you know, your pharmaceutical TV that's like, hey, take these SSRIs and we'll get rid of your depression and despair. No, no, no. What's really important is when you start questioning your reality, not just the world, but your reality, how you view it. What happens is we start to enter into what Robert Anton Wilson calls the chapel perilous, or the dark night of the soul. Right. These are all very important things. Another name for the black sun, or the negredo, the blackening, the beginning of the alchemical process of coagulating and disillusioning and building it back up. Of yourself. We can never do it to anybody else. Because one of Timothy Leary's main laws about consciousness and psychedelics and entheogens and these things is that we should never change anybody else's consciousness. Right. And, you know, and then you should only allow others to change, and don't allow others to change your own. Only you can be your own master who makes the grass green.
Right. What does the CIA say? You know, never trust a prankster.
Never trust a prankster. That's good, Robbie. That's hilarious.
But that's the whole thing, you know, and now getting into Robert Anton Wilson and the idea of these reality tunnels. It's very much like music.
Yes.
Right. So if you know, and when people say, what kind of music do you like? I always tell them I like good music. Because for me to say I like a specific genre or thing,
it limits you.
Right. And you go back to the ancient Irish myths, you know, of the old, you know, harp that was actually an intelligent being itself. You know, when they played that harp, those melodies, they could get you excited. They could put you to sleep. They had all these different, you know, and it's the idea of, you know, music controls, like soothes the savage beast.
It does,
you know. And so now with music, like these reality tunnels, you know, if we were to put on some Oklahoma, you know, steel pedal guitar and kind of sink into that for a few days, and then instantly switch and sink into some thrash metal with some double bass, and then, you know, go to some bluegrass and listen, and then go to some, you know, drum and bass, and kind of what you're actually doing is you're moving through different types of reality tunnels. And you can relate that to your mind itself on a higher level, in the sense that when you begin to see the world for the delusion, you know, the idea of samsara, then when you get into Eastern theology, the idea that all is burning around us, when you look at physics, the idea that there's more space between the atoms than the atoms themselves.
Right.
And, you know, and when you look at the way light moves, it is both a particle and a wave at the same time, and doesn't become something until an observer sees it. So, you know, we have to look at this reality, and what we are is we're a bunch of little, you know, Descartesian bubbles bumping against each other within our own understanding of what reality is. And so what happens is, depending upon the majority of what reality is, becomes what they write in the textbooks, in addition to whatever the source writing the textbooks wants you to think about, you know, because the government itself, to govern, you know, gubine means to steer, and mente means the mind. So the job of the government is to steer the mind. But what reality tunnel are you going to go down? Are you going to go down and be a militia activist and let some force that is wanting to rebel against the void take you and turn you into the void itself?
Yes.
You know, or are you going to become more of a mystic, where, you know, you see the fractal turning, and anything that can happen will happen, and so nothing is a surprise, you know. What Huxley, I think it was, said, you know, if the devil jumps up next to you, don't get excited, don't overreact, because, you know, it's all perception. It's all, you know, doors of perception. So it's, you know, and once you start to begin to realize that everything around you is an echo of an echo of an echo of an echo, and that you, being made in the image of the Creator, what are you? You are a creator yourself. We're all creators. That's why we have all these things, you know, and it depends on, you know, do you want to look at psychedelic culture and take that in as a reality tunnel, you know, and where I think it was George Carlin. He talks about, you know, they all have their own outfits.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, and you can just see by how they're dressed, like, you know, and what do they say? You know, you can tell what kind of party it is by what they wear, you know, like as far as, you know, referring to police and riot gear.
Oh, yeah.
Know? So it's this intrinsic idea of which reality do you choose to subside with. And Philip K. Dick says true reality is that which persists, right? So
yeah, very Parmenides.
Yes. But it's the whole thing of, you know, I mean, and people they go down these dark tunnels, and we do experience these chapel perilous moments where, you know, reality falls apart around us, and that it can either break you or you come out the other side as a new person.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it just reminds me of one of Philip K. Dick's essays, How to Build a Universe That Doesn't Fall Apart the Next Day. Right. It's one of like the most fascinating essays he's ever done. So everyone should go out and check that one. And exactly what you said, Philip K. Dick, when asked by a bunch of students at one of his talks he gave, he asked like, you know, what is reality? And he sat there for a second. And I've said this before. He sat there for a second and he had to think about it. And he looks at me and goes, well, the only thing I can truly come up with is reality is that which when you stop believing and it doesn't go away. So it's to talk about the same thing. But what's beautiful is, back to Philip K. Dick, the idea is that then with Philip K. Dick, we all know, so fascinating enough, even though he didn't become a billionaire or even out of poverty when he was writing his novels, even though
barely
today we have a lot of our science fiction movies are based off of Philip K. Dick novels, right? So that number one that we talked about is Blade Runner, which is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? A Scanner Darkly that's got some of the most hugest, and so that's Minority Report. Yes. And so, you know, so Minority Report with Tom Cruise. A Scanner Darkly's got Keanu Reeves and all of the biggest names in Hollywood, and it's brilliant. Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. You get Adjustment Bureau, and that's got Matt Damon in it. And so we have Paycheck. Yeah, and the Paycheck. With Nicolas Cage, and he did Next.
Yeah. Now, what we have to really understand about Philip K. Dick is he, through the course of his career, he became somewhat addicted to amphetamines.
He did.
And he even talks about in his works that the possibility that amphetamines make one sort of a precog, in the sense that you can see around the curvature of space into the future, essentially. And so, but now when we get into Robert Anton Wilson, he's a whole different character, coming from Playboy editor, you know, moving into kind of this Sufi kind of mystic.
Yeah, a married Buddhist, right? Him and his wife got married as Buddhists.
And his daughter, at one point, went out and was beaten down by a bunch of thugs and died. Yeah, and Lily. He had to go through that. But Robert Anton Wilson kind of links into the psychedelic culture to a great extent. Philip K. Dick kind of related into the early Silicon Valley culture to a great extent. So, you know, as far as the dichotomy between the two, and Robert Anton Wilson, as far as dialectics and the idea of, you know, he would make up words to describe reality that wasn't being described because of the lack of the English language, you know? And so he had this like maybe so, maybe not word. He has, you know, these different words that kind of create new ideas of what reality is, because Robert Anton Wilson, he says that the modern Inquisition is basically the cutting down or the getting rid of the vocabulary that allows us to describe the information we're receiving through our input mechanisms. And essentially, through broadening the language, it broadens the possibilities of what reality can even be.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love that. Everybody out there, thank you for listening as we move forward in this crazy realm of the cosmic dance of meaning and myth. This is the great Robbie Marx next to me, and I'm Brandon Lee of MagusintheMedia. If you haven't already, subscribe, like, and share to both of us, because we're continuing to drop little breadcrumbs as we slowly, no, there's no slowly falling down the rabbit hole. We're so far down the rabbit hole. We've come out in your own living room, in your car, or in your ear right now. Fascinating enough, it makes me think like what you're talking about with Phillip K. Dick and the little mosquito bugs that are talking in their ear. I mean, what are these? Yeah. What everyone's running around right now with blue, like I won't touch Bluetooth very well, but like right. I'm a corded individual, just so you all know. Bluetooth will rot your brain, give you cancer, and change the frequency of your nervous system, which goes back to exactly what we're talking about, is to become what I think would be the sovereign magician, to call back to Nick's and I talk we had the other day on our show, was that idea of like to truly become your own sovereign magician in the world, a mystic, somebody who swims in the seas of chaos instead of drowns. Right. The idea is to take control of that nervous system, understand how your perceptions are coloring your feelings and moving every system in your body, how your breath controls your limbic system and puts you from a sympathetic to a parasympathetic and back state, how cortisol releases, how melatonin is being released, and how it keeps our sleep cycles from actually being able to lock up with out of the earth. And so if we're never touching grass, as the comment sets, we're never truly being able to reaffirm our godlike status of the man god, of like, how do we line ourselves with the cyclical natures of the moon and tide? And these two characters, Robert Anton Wilson and Phillip K. Dick, give us two different aspects of those things. Both people went God mad. And I think that's really important to know as we understand how they moved through this reality, that by going God mad, you break down you can break yourself down to rebuild yourself. And that is that alchemical process. Robert Anton Wilson, as Robbie was talking about, is telling you about something like general semantics with Alfred Korzynski, and how our nervous system is a nervous system of a hierarchy of abstraction from the concrete realm to the highest levels of abstraction, where most of the brainwashing is taking place. The fourth wilderness, exactly. And then how we have one of his words, right? The reality tunnels, or, and that instead of having dogmas which lock us within one reality tunnel and we view all of reality through that one lens, right. Instead he has small katmas. And I think that's hilarious. And these katmas, what they do is they're small little meta belief structures that we put in and out to be able to change our reality tunnel, thus putting us from the Aristotelian this or that, the true or false, into a maybe state, or a maybe logic from the Aristotelian. Yeah, and from more Schrodinger, is the cat alive or dead? Thus, you get the explosion from the Hassan Osman Spare into and Crowley into the Robert Anton Wilson, because Wilson was working with both of those works. Crowley was one of his greatest prophets of the New Age, and taking his techniques of consciousness change, interacting it with the LSD, his own LSD experiments, and then being able to change reality tunnels at bay, because he had his own like extraterrestrial interdimensional experiences with his Syrian, with the Series B experiments that he was doing, and Timothy Leary had very similar ones in that time frame.
Yes, with the star seeds
and we don't mean some new agey nonsensical starseed nonsense. That's bullshit. Anybody out there who thinks they're a starseed, you're a fucking moron.
It's been co-opted and turned into something completely different than its original representation, which is a simulacra of itself. Very important, which is then why I think these two men's work is so important, because if we start to understand that even in the modern New Age, the modern occult, the modern occult community, which we find ourselves in, it seems like it's a simulacra of what actual mystics, magicians, and sorcerers have been doing for years. If you read Yates talks about the idea that whenever an individual investigates history, that it actually brings history alive again. Very much back to the idea of the instruments of Plato and that harmony and melody.
Yeah.
When you pick up a book, it's one of the most magical devices that you can have and hold, because you actually have a view, a window into the perspective of an individual in the past and how they experienced reality during that time, and something that they thought was important enough to write down to convey into the future. This is all very time morphous, pulling apart the abstract levels of what even time space is, but now, within one of Philip K. Dick books, there's a mining colony on Mars where they've actually outlawed the Bible, to have and possess the Bible. And the reason is they had gotten to the point where the Bible became a holographic text, that it was the way it had been put together. And you've seen some of these charts where they link all the parts of the Bible, and then they run it through AI, and AI says it's 100% that this text was written by AI, which is all
That's
great.
funny. That's funny.
Getting in,
that goes back to Philip K. Dick's and Divine Invasion.
And
Divine
Invasion, exactly. And looking at reality outside of all time space itself and trying to heal it from the end to the beginning, which modern physics has also told us that the decisions we make in the future affect the past. So it gets into this really, like Doctor Who would say, timey-wimey kind of thing that's very amorphous. But these all of these books, all of these things, they influence how we see what this experience is we're having.
Oh yeah.
And so, when you feed your head, be conscious of what the information is that you're putting in there, because it's going to affect you on a metaphysical, subconscious, and physical level.
Oh yeah, which is then it goes back to why it's so important to understand that all the symbols and stories and the structures that are being put at you, the propaganda and good and bad, because propaganda is coming out around us at all avenues, is doing just that. Is feeding your head with the messages that they want you to then go out and do. We are all becoming Manchurian candidates unless you do like Neo did in the Matrix, and he took the red pill and he was able to unplug from that. I will state that instead of just like that story, it's really important that we understand that our practice, the praxis that we use to experience our everyday reality, is what is so important. That is the red pill. It is the thing that is trying to deconstruct all the identifiers that we project out into reality and how people see us. It's all about taking those things away and finding the stillness within the mind-body syzygy. And when you find that stillness, we realize that the I isn't ever actually there. That in Robert Anton Wilson's words, he talks about how, who is the master who makes the grass green? And then you just all of a sudden you're like, oh, and then you're like, well, I am. And then you realize, try searching for the I, and you'll continue opening up doors into ad infinitum, because there is no I to be found. And that's how we reach a level of enlightenment.
Right. And now when you get into Robert Anton Wilson and the idea of enlightenment in regard to illumination, in regard to the Illuminati, Robert Anton Wilson says, you start to go down these roads to understand yourself and the world, and you run into these mystery schools, all this different mysticism, and essentially, before you know it, you yourself are in the Illuminati, because you become an illuminated one.
Yeah.
It's and when looking at Robert Anton Wilson's works, my favorite personally is the historical Illuminatus trilogy.
Mine too.
Yeah. The Illuminati book that he wrote, it's great. It's kind of all over the place. He's writing that with someone else. But then you get into his more modern works, and he becomes much more philosophical in regard to etymology, how words work, how words affect the mind, getting into the modern Inquisition, kind of looking at, and then also, I don't know if you have seen, but he had sent a note to someone, and it was the ultimate secret of the Illuminati. And it was an individual that was bent down, grabbing their ankles, and the eye of the Illuminati was the bunghole.
It was the bunghole. Isn't that funny how that always is?
Yes. So, but Robert Anton Wilson is a chaos magician.
Yes.
So, and then you can go back to, what is it, Damocles the Younger, and get into the ideas of Discordianism.
Yeah.
That kind of, I've got a copy right over there. But yeah, I remember out on fish tour, somebody gave me a copy of Discordianism. I was on the road traveling around, and it's like, and on Sunday, on this day you can eat this many hot dogs.
Yes,
this day you can't eat any hot dogs, but on Sunday you can eat as many hot dogs as you want. And it's just like, this is the true representation of the absurdity of the reality that we live within. If you were an individual coming in from outside and viewing the system.
No, it's beautiful. And so everyone out there who doesn't know, the Principia Discordia is the foundational text of Discordianism, which is a technical fake religion or philosophy or elaborate joke, depending on how seriously you want to take it. Which
all hail Eris.
All hail Eris, which is itself is part of the point. It was written.
I don't believe it.
No,
I'm just saying. This is the slogan.
Yeah. All hail Eris. Yeah, exactly. And so it was primarily written by a guy by the name of Greg Hill, or he calls himself Malaclips the Younger, with contributions from a person named Carrie Thornley or Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst. Interesting enough, Karen Thornley was deeply integrated. Why the fucking 60s are so crazy is because Carrie Thornley, the CIA, and the JFK assassination with who supposedly did it? I'm sorry. Sometimes my mind goes blank. Who supposedly?
Name's the guy from Cheers' dad.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's many case scenarios.
Yes. But because I don't believe that he was killed. Yes, exactly. Assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. Sorry. So, thank you. So supposedly. Supposedly Lee Harvey Oswald and Carrie Thornley were integrated in this craziness of all these things going on. And so it's crazy how then with Principia Discordia being all hail Eris, Eris being the central figure, she is the Greek goddess of discord. Yes. And they just published these anti-propaganda books and put them everywhere. Yep. And so then with the Greek goddess of discord and chaos reframed not as a destructive force to suppress us, but a fundamental creative principle underlying all of reality. The text argues that both order and disorder are equally impositions
and necessary
on the formless flux of existence, and that the Western tendency to privilege order over chaos is itself a form of delusion, and they call it the anaristic illusion. The counterpart to that is the eristic illusion, is the belief that chaos alone is real. The honest position, according to the principle, is to hold both as equally fictional grids laid over something that precedes both. And so that takes us away from the Aristotelian logic that's trying to continue to just make things have to be one way instead of the many.
And that's very Sufi, Gnostic, when you get into the mystics within Islam.
Right. Yeah. What's beautiful is once you're climbing up the tree, as much problems as you have with your organized religions being Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, the highest level of Christian mysticism to your highest level of Jewish mysticism to your highest level of the Sufic orders, they take all the contradictions and it finally just dissipates, and you get these high level enlightened thinkers who put the heart first. Interesting enough. Rumi being one of the most famous poets, Idris Shah, if anyone wants to ever read, a guy who brings us into levels of Sufism, but the Christian mystics like Master Eckhart, to your Jewish mysticism with the Kabbalah, we, as all magicians, we use our Abrahamic traditions and understand that it's the esoteric traditions that are underlying these things, and that they are, according to my reality tunnel and many prophets and adepts, that can be named like the true golden thread that we're all trying to follow.
Yes.
And we're trying to tap into that golden thread through our practices in the age of chaos. We are in the age of chaos right now as AI, right? AI, alien disclosure, and understanding that billionaire oligarchic parasitic techno-feudalists are diddling kids at all islands and trying to put a control grid around our system, leading us back to Philip K. Dick talks about how in Minority Report, this which is called something else. You can buy this for you wholesale. It's actually called Minority Report. Total Recall is called You Can Buy This for You Wholesale. So so Minority Report itself, we can see that every day with Palantir.
Oh yeah,
and Oracle.
And that's what these data centers are.
And that's what these data centers are. That people rebel against the data centers.
And Elon Musk says, essentially this AI homunculus within the machine is going to open some sort of a portal for some sort of a spirit to occupy. And then you go back into the Ancient of Days, and what is this spirit? What is this one that walks as many as it says on the dollar bill? Going back to my research in Nimrod, and that spirit of going back to Samael, the spirit of the dead, which is associated with Nimrod. And and Nimrod is a skinwalker, so he's walking in someone else's skin. He's simulating someone else's power. He is a simulacra of the power of the original man of creation. So again, this all kind of weaves into this weird, strange, wicked web.
It does.
Is the black iron prison that Philip K. Dick calls it, that we exist within, that are all these foundational limits that, and black iron prison kind of gets into the ideas of Saturn and, the black cube that's locked in the center of the earth, like Apollo at the bottom of the pit, is in a dreamy sleeping state, fluttering through, the foggy darkness. So it's like, what is this spirit that some of these technocrats within the dark Enlightenment, et cetera, are actually trying to participate. And then you kind of look at some of the work of Tracy Twyman with her Ouija board stuff, and kind of what came through all that is very interesting in regard. And these dwellers beyond the threshold, in a lot of cases, they are the ones that wandered in sorrow, that when they died, they became trapped in the physical matrix, and they became the demons or the shaitans that are they're spiteful against the humans. So what are we actually trying to communicate with? And what does that, Rex Diablos, of the head of the, Church of Satan, he said that he's building that Ragnarok device, to basically open up the gates and allow all those entities to come into our reality. So from an occult level to a technotronic level to, but it ultimately comes down to control of life on this, plane, this reality, this realm.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's fantastic because we are in this like bubbling chaos field of trying to understand our place in all things.
Right.
And I think that it's important that we see those who went out into the thresholds, into the unknown, and started trying to map those unknown territories, like these two characters that we're talking about today, with Philip K. Dick basically going mad in his own right. And that's so everyone knows, go out there and read Valis. It's part of, Aleister Crowley had his like, in his equinoxes and his AA in the beginning, he's got like, okay, read these books to understand the work.
Yes.
For me, Valis is one of those things. Yeah. Read Valis. It will mind fuck you.
Oh, yeah. But now even more so than that, after Philip K. Dick died, they found all his handwritten notes.
Exegesis.
As far as his exegesis. And this is him in his own mind space trying to reason out a lot of the things that he's writing into his works. And through the course of doing this, and we can't get off the subject of Philip K. Dick without getting to this idea of this pink beam of light that came down into him. And Philip K. Dick talked about the idea that, well, first off, within the exegesis, you have this entity that's outside of time and space. It's Zebra that camouflages itself and everything, that's working to correct the defunct like spirit of Ahriman that is ruling over this realm, trying to correct it from the end of time, you know, like we were talking about within physics. But this pink beam, back to the pink beam of light.
Yeah, 2374 is what it is. 2374
right,
is what he calls it. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally separate matter here. But he has a delivery coming, and when he opens the door, the girl has the
Visca Pisces, the fish,
Vesica
the
Pisces
Christian fish.
Yes. And a beam of light came from outer space and reflected off that fish and into his eyes, and basically changed the construct of what reality was within his reality tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
And he took on the you know, and you can call this being divergent. There are some clinical terms for, you know, having this sort of a breakdown, but he saw himself as modern Philip K. Dick, that was into like nice cars and drinking wine and listening to classical music and studying technology. And all of a sudden he had this other entity come into him that liked to drink beer, listen to rock and roll, and wanted fast cars. So he was living in two time periods at the same time, in ancient Rome and in modern day California.
Yeah.
And
70 AD, he realized that we were
70
living in
AD.
70 AD.
Yes.
And he all of a sudden could read Greek, Koine Greek.
Yes. And speak it.
And speak it out of nowhere.
Yeah. And he basically said that at this point in time that he realized he was still the same him, that he was trapped in this black iron prison, this matrix, maybe in the idea of reincarnation cycles or something along those lines, where this time in Rome, this was when time actually ended.
Yes.
And that nothing has changed since then, other than the fact that we as humans have moved stuff around. And then you get into the transmigration of Timothy Archer. And he talks about that when the Nag Hammadi texts were found within the caves, and they actually brought those out, that this was the living word that had been hidden away, and that this was also triggering time to begin again.
Yes,
which
the
kind
ectoplasmates is what he called it.
Yes, yeah. And it kind of also relates to the same aspects of Robert Anton Wilson in regard to the cosmic trigger, in the idea that, you know, in the Kali Yuga as well, where we sink down into an age of darkness, you know, and we have the dark ages where, you know, we have the great forgetting. And now we're coming into this new Aquarian, some people say the end of the Kali Yuga, where we're beginning to essentially all of our aspects of our mind are beginning to open up, and the possibilities of telepathy, precognition, remembering, tapping into the great Akashic record, knowing the true history of all of humanity. All of these things are beginning to come back to us as we begin to climb back up and enter back into the divine realm, nirvana, the garden, whatever you want to call it, within the cyclical waveform that humanity exists within.
That's beautiful. I hope you all understood exactly what he said, because if you didn't, there's another way of saying it. Interesting enough, Terence McKenna had his idea of novelty 2020 or 2012, right? And his novelty theory. And I think that's a really important one that goes hand in hand with the jumping Jesus phenomena of Robert Anton Wilson. But the novelty theory is that as we speed towards this point in time that he had some mathematical sequence to figure out, 2012, just like with the Mayan calendar, novelty would increase so much that information as it increased so much that it would actually take our consciousness and change it, and we'd have a paradigmatic shift into this new world. And as we make that shift into this new world, which I think maybe, you know, I remember exactly where I was in 2012, and, you know, just like 1999 into 2000, it's all like, okay, what really, you know, nothing really happened. And then we come to kind of figure out, it seems like since 2012 onward, and I think it's also because of this confluence of the internet and technology is continuing to speed up as we race ever towards AGI and the age of artificial intelligence.
Revelation.
we're in the age of revelation currently, and as apocalypse, meaning the idea that of an awakening, a lifting of the veil is what apocalypse actually means.
Right.
That we technically, what you're supposed to do as the sovereign magician or mystic in the world is you're supposed to bring upon your own apocalypse.
Right.
So that when the world goes through its own apocalyptic paradigmatic shift, that you can be a still point and energy source for those who don't understand what's happening. And we can help guide those through this apocalyptic times, which I think what Robbie's doing, what MagusintheMedia is here to do, what Nick with the Occult Rejects and all of our homeboys are trying to help us understand, and homegirls, are trying to help us all walk ourselves through this strange world of an age of AI and disclosure. And like what I'm always talking about is that I think alien disclosure is actually you waking up in your own realm and realizing that you can tap in and find Gnosis, and that Gnosis can lead you to the discovery of actually what consciousness is. And then you can know that there are beings all over the place
around us
at all times.
Well, and bringing that up, you get into the DMT experiments that they're doing intravenously, where they're actually able to hold
wild
people, in these states for upwards of 2-3 hours.
I don't like it very much, Robbie, to be honest. I don't like it because I had a version of me in some hypothetical realm had a never-ending Mary Poppins bag of some kind of substance that could be deemed DMT, and I know how powerful it was.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, it seems a little unnatural to try to hold somebody within those realms
for that long.
It doesn't seem
losing your. I mean, you want to talk. The idea is to tame your ego, not to destroy it, but to basically understand that you are not your ego, and to get your physical needs and the things that under control.
Yes.
Versus this is entering, I think, the phases of complete ego death, where the that kind of gets into William Burroughs, in the idea of these things that kill the soul, that dissipate your soul energy into the matrix so that you are no longer a cohesive being.
Yeah. And well, how can we then, even with the Philip K. Dick stuff, is how do we know that the person that comes back from those states isn't one of the DMT elves themselves?
That's occupied that space. Well, and within Philip K. Dick universe as well, you get into the, which one is it? Where they bring the fungus from deepest reaches of outer space. And when the people take it, because basically within these Mars mining colonies that he has set up, they bring simulacra people in, like robots in, to create the perception that you're not there by yourself, even though you are, right? But these workers within these mines, kind of like getting into the Canaanites and, working in the depths of the earth and the smoke and, bringing out these minerals for the production of reality itself, right? They're kind of bored with they go in the mines and they work all day, and then they come out and they kind of just want, so they give them this, what is it called? Choosy. There's these different, these different hallucinogenic kind of gums that they give them. So with the choosy, when they chew the choosy, they go into this pre-created matrix that's like a Barbie doll house, and there's like a Ken and a Barbie, and like a mass population of the women will occupy the Barbie doll, whereas the men will occupy the Ken, and they get to live in this perfect American suburban household with a green lawn and a white picket fence, and and sometimes they get to make love, and but they even become bored of that after a while, because it's just the same old show. It's just a simulacra of what reality is. So they bring in this new hallucinogen that the people start taking it, and they can't tell after a certain amount of time if they're actually in the hallucination or in reality. And it gets to the point where, and then they start to phase shift between reality and dimensions, where people in 100 years, they'll see them and they'll be like, oh, look, it's one of those ghosts, but it's actually the consciousness of that individual that is phase shifted and is now stuck in this liminal realm where it can't occupy reality anymore. So that kind of gets into what we were talking about there as well.
It
with
does.
these modern day trials.
Yeah, completely. And like, I feel like we see a lot of people stuck within liminal reality.
Those realities. Oh, yes.
You know, and it's like, and you can tell when somebody doesn't,
By how they talk.
By how they talk.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Are they nuanced thinkers? Or are you just regurgitating mainstream media talking points?
Right.
And I think nuanced thinkers, you can hear it because you can't so much pinpoint them. You're like, okay, well, the thing is somebody said this once, and I took it for my own, is that if I can tell exactly how you're going to think and the kind of like maybe political party you are based upon the first few sentences or words that you spew out when asked a question, then you're not a nuanced thinker, and you should start to rethink where you got your ideas.
So now back to Robert Anton Wilson.
Yeah.
He specifically talks about the idea that what you should do is you should find something you disagree with, and you should go to that thing, and you should subscribe to their newsletter, and you should read their texts that they recommend, and you should do all these things to facilitate yourself understanding what that thing is. And then you have a more determined understanding of whether or not that thing is to be valued or dismissed.
Yeah, I love that. And then, and when you spoke, it's not like I see philosophers do this, but like when you're learning philosophy in school, it's called steel manning an argument.
Right.
You should first steel man somebody's argument.
It drives my wife crazy. Because she's like, why do you do that? And I'm like, because, you come up against these people and it's like, let's dance. I mean, and that's, to me, intellectually, I think it's fun.
So. And it's important because it helps you then from not falling into a fallacy of then building straw men.
Yeah.
Which people do at all times, straw men or fallacy of authority. You're falling into these things where you don't understand truly how to, which is why then I think, so interesting enough, when I was in my younger 20s, as I was tumbling down the rabbit hole and then learning philosophy and training in martial arts, I was like reworking all things, right? As we learn with Timothy Leary into Robert Anton Wilson, he's got the 8 circuits of consciousness, and all these things are reworking the robot consciousness into then, as well as falling into your higher 4, which is then your neurosomatic states on up, cannabis all the way up to your, the breaking into the higher levels of the occult experiences.
Cracking the egg.
You're cracking the egg open and birthing the butterfly from the larval caterpillar state, realizing that the butterfly speaks a different language, but also speaks the caterpillar language. Caterpillar doesn't speak that. And so what's fascinating is then, as we're working through these things, it's like I wanted to rebel against Aristotle.
Yeah.
Not really, because interesting enough, most people don't know this, but people think that Aristotle was rebelling against Plato.
Right.
But technically, if you read Gearson's work, I have the book over there. It's brilliant. I'm reading through it. There's the harmonists of that time frame. We're like, no, Aristotle was a Platonist. He was just extending into a different realm that Plato did, and also through his work, you can see what he was talking about through a different angle. And so so my teacher, one of my mentors and advisors, was like, hey, Brandon, don't you find it interesting? Because I was bringing up, like, I was going through Discordianism and Ra's work and Aleister Crowley. I'm doing all the things. I'm listening to my favorite. It's all spinning. I'm fucking spinning out here. And the idea is that then I thank God for like people like Grant Morrison and Alan Moore, 2 of my favorite writers and comic book writers of all time. They help kind of ground me with their work and their mythologies. But the idea, my professors was like, hey, Brandon, don't you think it's weird that you're trying to argue against Aristotle while using his syllogisms? And then it was like the light bulb was like, wow.
If you read St. Augustine, The City of God, he talks about every type of philosophy, and then he takes their type of philosophy and uses it to argue against the church, even the church's own philosophy.
Yeah, I think that's important.
But as far as dialectics and understanding the different reality tunnels, that have been coined, it's all around us. I mean, we are zipping through, and tunnels, serpents, when you get into the ancient Mayan literature, we're swallowed by the serpent. As we go through the serpent being digested, that is our life cycle. and when we're shat out the other side, we're back into the cosmos. So that reality tunnel, we're like within the serpent. We're like traveling through the belly of the serpent, and it's like, how do you choose to perceive what the walls of this reality are?
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And I think more people, I want all occultists and ceremonial magicians and people to read and take more seriously Philip K. Dick
Oh yeah.
and Robert Anton Wilson and everything that was going on, because why I find especially those two with Timothy Leary added in there is so important is because of how MK Ultra was what it was doing at that time frame. So I don't know, Robbie, if you've ever seen The Minds of Men by Truth Stream Media.
Maybe no, I don't.
Bro,
maybe
everyone out there, go and follow Truth Stream Media. Is a pod they are brilliant. And The Minds of Men came out years ago, and what it did is it's a 5-hour documentary that basically goes through exactly what was going on pre MK Ultra with the MK Ultra experiments and how that moved us forward into the program mechanisms of how we got the internet, electronics, and everything that's around us with Wi-Fi, and how they were using back in the 60s and 50s Wi-Fi and electronic towers to control animals and move them around.
Delgado experiments.
Exactly. And so you get all that going on, and then you have to wonder, it's kind of like what Kaiva and I were talking about on our show 2 weeks ago, was like, these little black mirrors are old ancient scrying technology that now is used as today's technological advancements of scrying, and they are MK Ultra machines. These make us cyborgs like Philip K. Dick.
Big time. So now when you go back and you look at the idea of technology or tech or Tekka, you can go back to the Egyptian goddess Tekka, right? And if you search it on the internet, you can't find anything because it will pull up everything technology related, and you hardly find anything on Tekka. But Tekka, as far as the first technology, she would sit by the river stream in the night and watch the progression of the stars and the moon, and she would take palm branches and she would weave the palm branches in certain ways to document the turning of the heavens. And the followers of Tekka were called Techies, right? So we have the modern day Tekka and we have the modern day Techie, and it's just another echo within the time space that thing has been built again, maybe not in the same way, but in a way that it takes on the same characteristics, and therefore we see the echo within time space itself.
Yeah, and I think this is a way of teleporting ourselves into really fast a magical worldview, which is, I think, interesting enough. A lot of the esoteric occult magical community actually doesn't have a magical worldview. I think that's one of my criticisms about this realm that you and I seem to wax and wane throughout, because it's like, because this whole idea of magic being something to like become an identifier. Like now my identity is I'm a magician and I perform rituals and I have my little altars throughout my house.
It's another costume.
Instead of understanding that the more phenomenological experience that we have with the reality is an embodied experience, one way so we don't allow this cosmic dance of this cosmic suffering, this lack of meaning, and people always adding these. I hate the term neurodivergent. I hate all these terms because of their identifiers that people latch onto, instead of understanding that there's a way to organize your reality so you can see the synchronicities without going mad.
Right.
And I think that's really important.
And I think that magical worldview, once you go through Chapel Perilous and you have that intrinsic burning off, that dissolution, and you become the Negrito, that you work, through the various forces and elements to weld into, through the white stone, into the philosopher's stone, to gain that wisdom, that divine medicine handed down from the eternal, that once you get into this understanding that we are in a temporary fixed place, as far as the mechanical and the physical, but as far as ourselves internally, we are divine, eternal beings that
Yes.
can transmutate between levels of reality and consciousness.
Oh yeah.
You know, and
Oh yeah.
that's
It's
possible on the physical level
yeah.
as far as on the astral level,
Yeah.
which we've seen through, Project Gateway and all these
Yeah.
various different exercises of how to actually use the mind's eye to astral travel.
That's
You know?
beautiful. I like that.
Yeah.
In all that, it's that we aren't trying to become more than human.
No,
We are trying to
trying to
actually be
become human.
human. And
Yes.
that's, I think, a big misnomer, is like we're trying to
Yes.
transcend humanity. And I'm all like, I
No.
don't actually think you're human yet.
I want to be the purest, most, and that's that. When the story of Noah's flood, the
Yeah.
reason that Noah was acceptable was because he was unadulterated.
Yeah.
He was the most
Right.
pure human that was left within the matrix of what existed at that time.
Yeah.
That wasn't, decayed.
That's
It
good.
needed some Ubik.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
So
beautiful.
yeah.
I do know. That's beautiful. So this is gonna have to be we're gonna have to do multi parts, you and I was breaking down Philip K. Dick. Maybe we'll just do a
Mhm.
Philip K. Dick show. Maybe we'll just do a Robert Anton Wilson show. Because the archons of this great world are calling me to many other things for this fine day. Other than that, I would spend hours talking to you about this. Robbie, give them a little breakdown of like why Philip K. Dick and Robert Anton Wilson, and what does Operation Mindfuck mean to you?
I mean, when you start looking at what was it? The first, not the first one. It was the Birth album that Grateful Dead did. They
Yeah,
wanted to call that album Mindfuck,
yeah.
but the record industry said no, 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 no. So it ended up being posthumously titled Bertha.
Right.
But nonetheless, tying in with the acid tests and MK Ultra, tying in with Robert Anton Wilson, Discordianism, tying in with Philip K. Dick, and and a lot of what this has to do with is the pranksters per se were trying to. You look at the Macy conferences with the changing images of man, and it's the idea of creating this fractioning that will stress the population to such an extent that the Ubermeister or the new man will rise out of it. You'll have inflection points where certain people will spark and become hyper geniuses. So when we look at like Crick discovering LSD,
Yeah.
from discovering the DNA molecule
Yeah.
after an LSD trip. When you look at who was it, Doc, the baseball player that did the perfect no hitter,
Oh
going out,
yeah, yeah. Not Doc Holliday, but I know what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm not into sports, but
Yeah, no.
yeah, but you see these, and when you get into this quote unquote head community that came out of this psychedelic movement, from the strange scenes in the canyon to the acid test in San Francisco to kind of all the communes that are going on in California, you have inherent people that have created greatness within the world. And you also have people that have spiraled off into darkness and death as a result. So there's some idea that, like with Timothy Leary, we're actually trying to evolve the consciousness of humanity as a whole. Same thing with Cosmic Trigger, trying to evolve the consciousness to a point where we become the new man or the Ubermeister or whatever you want to call it. And so when you look at modern technocrats, when you look at modern banking classes worshiping these old entities that are associated with these spirits that the technocrats are trying to summon up, it kind of relates to the idea of what really is the reality that we exist within. So, and you should always, like the whole psychedelic, bumper stickers that you see on Grateful Dead, like question everything.
Yeah.
And you go through that chapel perilous, you have a falling away, you have you reject industrial products. I didn't have a television for almost 15 years. I have a
Nice.
television again now
Yeah.
because I'm more secure in myself.
Yeah.
So, and I enjoy film,
Yeah.
so it's but it directly applies to having you know, and I don't want to necessarily relate it to Gnosticism, but you gain gnosis. You gain a physical understanding that brings you into a more magical viewpoint, that makes life more exciting, that makes life more beautiful, that allows you to just see the fractal spin around you a little bit, and allows you to not get so caught up in what all these forces are trying to project into your mindscape.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Robbie. I agree. That's beautiful. I love that. I think one of the terms that for myself that we didn't really talk about today, but has been important for my understanding of reality itself, and how we don't want to get caught up in such a myopic view of and thinking that our model of reality is the model of reality,
right?
Because that's where we get into levels of authoritarianism and tyranny.
Yes.
And the biggest tyrant isn't the one in the White House. The biggest tyrant is the one that you look at while you're brushing your teeth every morning.
Anytime anything crystallizes, then it becomes authoritarian, because that is the only mean and method by which something can exist within the mind's eye of those people.
Yeah, nice. That's I agree. And so of those of you who don't understand guerrilla ontology, which Robert Anton Wilson coined this term deliberately for his writing and communication strategies built around destabilizing actually his readers and their fixed assumptions about the nature of reality, because this is what the core argument of everything is what is the nature of reality. And this core idea is that most people are trapped inside a single reality tunnel, a coherent but ultimately most likely a constructed worldview that filters perception and forecloses other possibilities. So when you're filtering your perception through only one of these reality tunnels, all other possibilities go away. On the opposite hand of that, I don't agree with the postmodern worldview that the relativism and that all things are the same and my perspective is truth. And that is dog shit. And we have to realize that that's not how this works, that there are hierarchies of values, and some things obviously work better than others, just like some magic works better than others. You have to have, as Crowley states, that our method is science, our aim is religion. And the next statement that I always love is, we don't place reliance on virgin or pigeon. Our method is science, our aim is religion. And to lead it into that is, through these practices, it's all about deconstructing your reality and rebuilding it up, the alchemical process. Wilson believed that that direct argument rarely dislodges these frameworks, because the mind simply incorporates new information into the existing structures. The tunnel defends itself. The robot will fight back. So guerrilla ontology works around the defenses mechanisms by ambushing it. Rather than presenting a coherent alternative worldview for the reader to accept or reject, it introduces multiple contradictory frameworks in rapid succession. And it puts the reader into an unstable ground to stand on. And by the time the mind reaches for usual interpretations, we've already moved on to something else. And all of a sudden you're left in this kind of like liminal state. You know, it's
the Jesuits actually were the ones that perfected this when they had, when they created the first printing press, as far as the Gutenberg press, right? And they started printing the Bible. You know, the Jesuits basically said, we have to quell this because it will lead to revolution. And the theology of Jesus is a revolutionary theology.
100%.
You know?
Oh yeah.
But nonetheless, they created this program that they called learning through learning, right? And so what it is it's the idea, the modern day idea of flooding the zone, like we're seeing right now with conspiratainment, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So essentially what you do is you put
out
occult
media on all things.
Occult media, yeah. But you put out so much information.
Yeah.
Some of it's true, some of it's, completely false, some of it's in between, but you just put such a mass amount of it that people enter into this. And again, it's controlling the reality tunnel. Instead of heading down this biblical tunnel, people are reading all this other stuff, and it makes it more amorphous. It makes the walls looser. It opens up the idea of what reality can be and is. And I think we're seeing that now with modern day social media.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And interesting enough, then Operation Mindfuck being something Robert Anton Wilson came up. Interesting enough, OM being Om, the great thing that dissolves and destroys all thoughts, is that Operation Mindfuck is coming up at all times. And so I think even then, the techno-feudalists, the parasitic oligarchs, are also operating on these same things without
Oh
even
yeah.
them knowing it. And that's the beauty of all this, is that, as Buckminster Fuller states, we are on spaceship Earth and there is nobody at the helm.
Yep.
And I think
The
that's really
demon
important to
haunted
know.
world.
Yeah, and it's time for us all to take control of our own nervous systems, take
Right.
control of our own body, spirit, soul apparatuses, so you can become fully human through these magical techniques and these practices. Do the work, do the practices. They work, but find out how it works by not adding on layers of identifiers, but truly digging deep into what it means to be fully human and a soul in this world.
And go back and read the ancient texts. Go back
Read
and
the
read
texts.
all of Plato. Read all of
Yes.
Aristotle. Read these different philosophers that have brought us into the modern, you know, and you were talking about as far as information in general, right? You know, Alex Jones is like InfoWars, and
Yeah,
Hillary
yeah.
Clinton's like, we're losing the information war.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then you got, you know, it's as relevant as it was in ancient Babylon.
It was.
As it is right now.
Oh yeah, because we haven't changed all that much in even 30,000 years of being human.
Right.
And that's
And the
fascinating.
Babylon system, it still just keeps echoing along. You know, it's anytime you know, like Philip K. Dick says, the empire never ended.
Exactly. Beautiful. I love that. So right now we are at the cosmic dance of meaning and madness, and you have seen both Mr. Marx and I back and forth as we're spinning, but in an elegant, organic way, finding how to choose, how to actually organize our consciousness in this great plane of existence. We can see it as a black iron prison, and I think it's important to see the walls around us, but then realize that through these practices, through becoming a sovereign magician and mystic, that then you can see God within all things. And that's something that is in the background of both of these brilliant men's work.
Zebra.
Is that zebra is this thing that peers through all of reality as it's laying breadcrumbs, so you can finally remember exactly
and heal
who
the
you
wound,
are.
Heal the eternal wound that we all suffer.
It's beautiful. Robbie, tell them where they can find you.
R. Marx, Robbie Marx, artist, illustrator. You can go to my link tree, which is linktree RMARX, and that will pull up my social media, my various Meta Mindcast podcasts that I have. I have my Patreon on there. I have my website all the way. And if you go to my Etsy, if you like the things we're talking about and you want to support, here's the pitch. Go check out some of my artwork, and you can help support and at the same time gain something that symbolically will hopefully be uplifting within your reality.
Ooh, I love that. Yep, the symbols and signs and motifs and statues and all the little literatures and pictures we put around are continually imprinting deep within this consciousness. And so you might as well be the creator and discoverer of your own world, so you know when you step out into this crazy madness that you don't get taken over, but that you truly can shine bright like a crazy diamond.
Right?
You like what I did there?
Yeah. And speaking of Pink Floyd, go check out my Etsy. I got my Pink Floyd tees that I did. Custom font, front and back, and on a custom ice dye tee. They're getting low. I'm getting another box of them in here probably by the end of this week. So, but yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm going to answer this one question that just popped up last minute. Eternus Transmogriphus 49. Here's a question. How does one cut through the massive BS exclusionary perception filter and experience the true hyper-reality? Not just trip for a little bit and return default, but maintain it. This is a great question, because I feel like sometimes we talk really fast and it gets kind of missed. But the only way to do that, and I'm going to lock it in within a myopic way of saying the only way, is to find a practice, do it daily, like your life depends on it. Meditate, break the mind parasite, see that there is a walls around you and you are the one who built it. Walk out of the cave into the light.
Create the door.
The door is, what's the story? The door has always been there. For some reason, you're just sitting outside of it thinking somebody's going to give you the key. The door has been unlocked the whole time.
And you also have to realize all of these things that you're participating with. from the type of music you're listening to the
Yes.
type of television that you're intaking, to the choice of literature that you're reading. All of these things are going to affect how you view and see the world. So explore other avenues, explore things that contradict your views, try to see things from both sides dialectically, simultaneously. And you know, the mystic, the hermit, it's the idea of you walk away from the world. That's what Merlin did. That's what, you know, any of these mystics do, is you see the world. Even Francis Bacon, you know, he went into his own hermitage, but you see the world for the corruption that it is. And honestly, you know, if you fight the monster long enough, you become the monster.
That's
You know?
what,
So
yep.
you kind of have to first find your true footing, root down into what you perceive as reality, the things that persist. And if you put away the phone, you put away the TV, you put away the music, you walk out into the woods and you listen to yourself and you listen to the environment and you center these things. You know, you have to learn to control your thoughts through meditative practice.
Yep.
And not allow every thought that jumps up to affect your psyche. You have to realize that your mind chatters.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it's a multitude of inner things and outer things, and you know, and following some of these regimented practices can definitely help in regard to lifting the veil or cracking that egg.
Yeah, and it's going to be hard, and
Oh, it is.
and you will
You're
fall
gonna
within Chapel of Paris, and it's
Oh,
going
yeah.
to be despairing.
And people are going to get upset with you.
Yeah.
People are going to like disagree with you.
Yeah.
Some family members might even outright reject you.
Yeah.
It's you know, but it's because when you start to question what you are and how you are, it also makes those around you start to question themselves, and a lot of people aren't ready for that.
Yeah. And that's how then the Black Iron Prison starts to shake. And it starts to crumble around you. And it's not going to be the way you think it is. It's going to be exactly how it should be. And you got to continue on that path, even if you think that there is no reaching it.
The truth, the way, and the light.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. And as they say, to will, to know, to dare, and to keep silent. I thank everyone out there. You can find MagusintheMedia exactly where you're at. On YouTube, X, TikTok, Instagram. Pretty soon it's going to be on Apple and Spotify. I'm coming out with a Patreon. We're going deep. We're staying hard. And we're trying to defeat the empire one stream at a time. Thanks, Robbie. We're going to do this again.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. And everyone out there, you know, have a great day. And again, good night.